welcome to Chatty AF, the Anime Feminist podcast. My name is Caitlin, a writer and editor for Anime Feminist, as well as the owner of the blog Heroine Problem. Joining me today are Ashley and Lianne.
Hi, I'm Ashley. I run a Shoujo Manga podcast called Shoujo and Tell.
I'm Lianne Sentar. I'm marketing manager at Seven Seas Entertainment and editor at Sparkler Monthly.
So today we are talking about a subject very near and dear to all of our hearts. Shoujo manga.
Yay.
So, yay. Shoujo manga, if you are not aware of what that is basically manga and anime aimed at girls. It was, originally created more or less as a marketing term, I believe. Shoujo is, in addition to the sort of thematic writing and storytelling approaches, is separated out by what is advertised in magazines. So a Shoujo manga magazine is going to have a lot of ads for things like makeup and clothes, whereas series aimed at other demographics will have advertisements aimed at their target demographics. And that is really probably the one true defining trait of shoujo manga versus others, because the lines get a little blurry sometimes.
Yeah. They usually say whatever demographic the magazine that it ran in is aimed at, that's kind of your official label, even though there are some things that are technically shonen. For example, the Ancient Magus' Bride, I think, is technically in a shonen magazine and stuff. So,
or Horimiya, I hear called shoujo manga a lot.
Yep. Or I think technically Black Butler is a shonen.
Yeah, that's a Shonen Jump, I think.
No, I think it's G Fantasy or something. It's I'm pretty sure it's a Square Enix title. No, not Shonen Jump. That would be a bit...
No, someone lied to me then. Someone lied to me. So that is more or less what shoujo is. Less officially, it does tend to have more emotionally driven and romance driven stories, and less action driven, but that is not a hard and fast rule. So let's first talk about how exactly we got into shoujo. For me personally, my first shoujo anime was Fushigi Yugi.
Yeah?
which I have talked about at length on this podcast. But if you have not listened to the Fushigi Yugi watch along, basically I was 12 years old. I had never really seen anything like it. It was a series about a girl going on adventures, having these trials, and that really wasn't something that existed very much for 12-year-old me. And so, when I read it, it was like, oh, this is a story with things I like, adventure, fantasy, action, but with a girl and her emotions as the main focus.
12's a bit young to watch Fushigi Yugi.
I know. But at the same time, like, if I hadn't gotten into Fushigi Yugi after, like, the classic at the time entry point of Studio Ghibli and Ranma 1/2, I don't know if anime would have been a lifelong thing for me. So yeah, Fushigi Yugi is very important to me, very near and dear to my heart. So that was sort of what kept me going with shoujo manga for a long time, was stuff like that, like Magic Knight Rayearth, basically all the isekai series. Because it showed young women like me being capable and important and maybe making mistakes, but also sort of leading the story.
I would jump in to say that my experience is actually very similar to Caitlin, at least in regards to shoujo manga / anime. I also watched FY around the age of 12 to 13, which is, yes, definitely too young, but...
Yeah, did it mess you guys up? Like, I was like 15 or 16 when I watched that, and I was like, whoa, okay.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes,
okay.
it did.
It ruined us forever. No.
You can trace particular traumas to that.
Yeah, well...
Literally, yes.
I got into it with a bunch of friends, so I think that was, like, maybe helpful in making it less traumatic.
Mitigate some of that content.
Yeah. But like, yeah, we were all just really into, like, oh, who's the hottest celestial warrior? But it was also great because, yeah, it was about 2 female friends, and I watched like so many cartoons. Like I would watch, I didn't have cable or anything growing up, but like Saturday morning cartoon lineup, watched 5 hours of that straight, but it's all like mostly dude shows, right? Like it was like superhero shows, and I don't know, I remember like Static Shock, and like maybe there's some Pokemon in there eventually and stuff like that. But then like Escaflowne is the thing that like really started this, and then from there my friend recommended FY, and then we got really into that. And then from there, it goes further into shoujo manga. Like, we were like, okay, we're going to get farther into manga. We're all going to buy more Watase things. Like, Watase is probably the one mangaka that we, like, knew as a person.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
She was super important to me when I was growing up.
Yeah,
so
well,
like
she keeps churning out the good stuff, I think she's might be slowing down now. She's had chronic health problems for a really long time. I think that she said the current Shigeyugi she's working on is the last one. I mean, which makes sense, right? She's on the 4th girl, but I almost wonder if she's slowing down kind of in general, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, she's been doing it for so long, and manga writing is just really bad for your health. Like, honestly, the anime and manga industry is very exploitative.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
No.
But we won't.
She works noon to midnight every day. That's what she said in
gosh,
an interview a while ago.
I couldn't survive that. I would burn out so fast.
It's really awful.
Sometimes I feel like close to that because I do freelance writing on top of a full-time job, but like, oh no, like for as long as she's been doing it too.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like she's definitely slowing down. She, took like hiatus. She takes more hiatuses, I guess. Like there was a long hiatus when Genbu Kaiden was coming out, and now Byakuya is coming out. But who knows? She might have to go on hiatus for that. I don't know. There's only like a volume out. I mean,
let me think. She's been doing it. She debuted quite young. I'm pretty sure her debut, like she was like 18 or 19. Because
for Shigeyuki, she was 22 when she started, and she had already done the series before that.
Right. So, I mean, that was 20 years ago. Well, actually, more like 25. Well, I feel like Shigeyuki the manga it aired in TV in 96, so it probably started as a manga. It
started in 1992.
Was it 92? Jeez.
It was 92.
It's like Sailor Moon. Well, actually, that's when the anime Sailor Moon started, I think. Wow. Yeah, so if I were her, I'd probably stop. or just go to novel writing or something that's just a little bit less hard on your body, maybe. She had a number of novels that she sort of, I think they had somebody else write them, but they were a bunch of Seres novels.
Yeah, she did the outline for the Shigeyuki novels
that eventually got animated, so it was cool.
Unfortunately.
Well, okay, like if you want to argue with the story on that, fine, but I always like when kind of spin-off stuff ends up being folded into the biggest format canon. So like when you get these spin-off things that get put into the anime. That was true with like World's Greatest First Love, I think, too. I think that there was a whole couple that was literally just in novel form, and they just kind of put them in with the other guys.
But Lianne, how did you get into shoujo manga?
Sailor Moon, like a lot of women of my age. I was 14 when it first started coming out in on American TV, dubbed. And there wasn't much else anime at the time. It was basically that and Dragon Ball debuted similarly on American TV, like around the same time. And all the dudes were into Dragon Ball, and a lot of girls were into Sailor Moon. Like it wasn't just the nerds; it was like the cool girls and stuff. So I got kind of in that way, and also it was just completely different from everything else I'd seen before. Just anything from Japan. I mean, at that point, there'd been like a little bit of like Eiko, Project Eiko. I don't know if you guys are familiar. It's a really old.
Oh no, I've heard of it.
Yeah, I mean, it was one of the earlier like anime OVAs that came over here. I think even like Cartoon Network put some of the movies on, or the Sci-Fi Channel, or something crazy. It was just one of those early experimental things, like Ninja Scroll. You know, we're talking like sort of early to mid '90s stuff. But yeah, Sailor Moon was, and then I got a job in it shortly after, so there was nothing out.
So like what? So I think we are all sort of saying similar things in that like we had never really seen anything like shoujo manga when we came across it. So like what exactly was personally appealing about it? Was it just that it was, you know, like I said, girls taking charge, being the focus? Was that mostly it?
I mean, yeah, there was like kind of centralizing female characters and kind of what they felt and what they were going through as sort of the central narrative. I thought kind of the way they dealt with boys was very different too. Instead of kind of having, you know, the one boy, or in the case, I mean, Sailor Moon had the one boy to be fair, but like, everything beyond Sailor Moon, I should say. You know, Shigeugi is a great example of that. There was like, here's a cavalcade of hot dudes.
Yeah.
Like, and it kind of, she ended up being bounced between two, the way that, you know, even kind of YA fiction for girls and stuff have moved. There's often like a love triangle, so there are two different guys. But just kind of being surrounded by that and having options and just feeling that everything from, you know, not just the main girl, but also the boys around her and the story construction was all catering to women 100% of the time. Like there was no point where it was like they expected boys to be able to relate.
Right. There was no like fellas sort of moment.
No, not at all. I mean, like, and even when you have things that like would maybe be a, you know, in Hollywood or something, if you have like a girl in the bath, might be sort of like the, oh, let's see this famous actress's boobs. Even when they did scenes like that in shoujo, it was like you could tell it was because they were feeling vulnerable at the time. They're sitting in the bathtub, you know, or it's supposed to be relatable, or if anybody's going to get turned on, it's going to be women who are attracted to women. Like, it was still marketed to women and girls.
Right.
So, like, to me, that kind of, like, being catered to on every level was just awesome. You know, like, at no point did I feel like I was not supposed to be in the front row.
Right.
Like, in the splash zone. Like, this is all girls. You should be with all your girlfriends, and you should all get together and watch this together, and who cares if boys don't want it. So much of, especially, like, Western media, which does not separate by gender quite as much as Japan does, so much of it is, like, they are terrified of boys not wanting to watch. And shoujo does not give a fuck. So.
That's so true. I was just thinking that, like, everything, even stuff that has, like, a largely female cast or, like, you know, female main characters, like, there's always, like, at least one moment where it's like, and here's for the boys.
Yeah. Or it's just, like, and male writers who just, the women are just really unrealistic or unlikable. Just, yeah, that, like, from the top to the bottom, the creation of shoujo is just, I mean, there are men involved sometimes, for sure. Like, there are male editors, there are male animators, there are male directors. But it's like they kind of have to know how to play the game to even get in the door. And I know that Naoko Takeuchi, the mangaka of Sailor Moon, has, way back in the day, I was reading interviews with her, and she said that, like, oh, the manga is going to feel very different from the manga will feel different from the anime because the anime is mostly animated by men. Whereas the manga is, you know, I drew that. Even though she famously had a male editor, the uncompromising power of femininity in her manga it's like an epic poem. Like, I never thought Sailor Moon, the manga, was that much of a Sentai show, was not that much of, like, you know, a superhero story. It kind of started that way, and it went full on kind of like existential artistry about, like, femininity and the various forms of femininity that are all valid, and, you know, women getting it on with other women, and men wanting to dress like women, or men wanting to become women, or like every variation of feminine power you could possibly think of, and it was all done in a really awesome artsy kind of style, which at the time when I was reading as a teenager I kind of didn't get. But as an adult, like, I'm very glad that she was kind of 100% uncompromising on that every story that she wanted to tell was about feminine power, coded in a lot of different ways. There was no one version of feminine power either, you know, which most people know famously because of like Sailor Jupiter, who is kind of a tough girl. And then they expanded into like the 19,000 sailors of all different types.
All right. My confession is that I have not actually seen very much Sailor Moon. Most of what I know about it is from cultural osmosis.
Also have to admit that I've watched like 30 episodes semi-recently, though, so there's that.
I mean, I think it stands up pretty well, but it's not something that I return to a lot because it was really important when I was a teenager and growing into a woman to see that kind of material. And it left a profound effect on me, but I don't really go back to it because it was specifically kind of a growth experience. And I know different people feel differently about that. Some people, they are still go back and watch Sailor Moon when they're having a bad day, and like more power to them. But to me, it was like, and that's when I think people should be reading and watching Sailor Moon, when they're like not sure how to be a woman. Because it's like, here's the 10 trillion ways that you are already a woman and why it gives you magic.
Yeah. Ashley, do you have anything that's like that was particular to shoujo for you other than what we've already talked about?
Yeah, I mean, I think also just the general prettiness of the art is not something that is typically done in Western animation. That I was like, oh,
all the flowers.
Yeah, all the flowers, like everybody
and bubbles.
Everybody, not just like hot dudes looking hot, but the girls look really pretty. Like, it was just great that way. And yeah, in terms of like having dude options as well as like it's like watching cartoons. Like, I had a big struggle with femininity from like I played ice hockey but only on all male teams, and like I would get upset if people said I looked cute and stuff. Like, I cried when my coach said I looked cute in a dress once because I did not want to wear a dress and I didn't want to be different and stuff. So like those types of things. So then like that's when I'm like 7. So then watching shoujo anime and reading shoujo manga was helpful in being like, this is not so bad. Like, I could identify, like, I was actually supposed to objectify those dudes in shoujo manga in a way. Whereas, you know, otherwise watching cartoons, like, you're kind of doing it as a girl, but knowing that that story is not made for you. And, like, it's cool to identify with the male character, but it's still annoying that, like, dudes would never identify with a female character in the same way. So it was just, like, a very good transitional thing for me. To help me realize in my struggle for femininity that it's like okay to have feelings. Seriously.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, being beautiful is cool. Like, that's fine.
So like, we sort of talked about like a lot of the best things about shoujo manga, and I do want to throw in also like not just like the way it is supportive of femininity and like the female perspective, but also like the emotionality of it. It's very, shoujo manga tends to be very emotionally driven and very focused on like the characters' thoughts and feelings and perspectives, and I feel like that has always been really important to me. Like, from my early fandom days, like I would write like the introspective fan fiction, or like write like really melodramatic stuff. Right. Even good stuff, even when I was just into when I was into Animorphs, I would just write all these like melodramatic scenarios. And it's just like well before shoujo manga touched my life.
Yeah. Well, I used to joke with my friends like shonen is all about the goal, shoujo is about the journey. I think of so many shoujo series that they start with a premise that they ditch almost immediately in favor of something that was more fun. A really good example of that is High School Debut, which like
I just started reading that.
Oh, I love it.
It is.
Yeah.
It is a delight. You're going to love it. But volume 1 is completely different from volume 2 and on, because it was like, oh, this is this cool guy and he's going to teach me to be cool, and then it's like, no, actually we're all a bunch of giant dorks. Let's just goof off and have fun, and who cares. And there are quite a few shoujo like that, that kind of spiral in the best sort of way. Kind of anything by Yoshiki Nakamura is good. She does Skip Beat, but before she did Skip Beat, she did Tokyo Crazy Paradise, which is like the best. It's like the best manga ever, and it will never come over here because the art is too ugly and dated. But it was she actually combines shoujo and shonen tropes in a way that's very interesting and also completely batshit. I highly recommend her. I don't know if you guys have read Skip Beat.
I read quite a bit of Skip Beat. I actually ended up dropping it partially because it sort of got away from the central premise.
Yes.
which was that was interesting to me. Like, I liked the angry heroine. I liked who was like motivated by
spite,
revenge, and once that sort of started not being a thing as much anymore, I was like,
yeah, all her stuff goes
less interested,
totally off the rails. Like, and I don't think entirely by design, but it's just the way that she writes. And then she'll do things like break the fourth wall. She'll turn metaphors literal. Like, she just kind of, whenever she feels like doing something weird, she'll do it. And that's why I really like her as a mangaka, because she's constantly surprising me. And you have to have a very high suspension of disbelief in her stuff, because her premises are always out of the stratosphere weird. I'm glad Skip Beat's doing well, because that's not something that I thought would be super marketable, the way that she writes, where she's like, I'm bored with this thing now, and I'm going to do this other, wacky thing. But, yeah, I mean, the central conflict, it's like trying to get back at her ex-boyfriend. I mean, there was like 13 volumes where he wasn't even in it anymore, because it really wasn't about him. It was about her trying to, like, decide if she needed, like, if she was able to let go of hate in her heart. That he was kind of like, who cares about what happens to him? I need to live my life, and is this something I can let go? And then as she's peeling away the layers of crazy, it's like, oh boy, there's a lot of shit to unpack here.
I will admit that I've only watched the anime of Skip Beat, but this does remind me of one of the things that I love about shoujo manga is the focus on female friendships in particular.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I really got into, like, watching Skip Beat. I was like, I don't care about whatever this dumb romantic drama that's happening. And I feel similarly about stuff like Kimi ni Todake. Like, I'm like, okay, whatever. Like, yeah, this romance is fine, but, like, I am here for the 3 main females and their friendship. Like, let's be real here. And that's basically how I felt about, like, watching Skip Beat. Like, I liked watching them be, like, initially always kind of rivals, because, they're in a very competitive, like, modeling, acting business, but then they always become friends, and I was like, yes, I'm here for this. Like,
yeah, the female friendships in that one were really good. I happen to actually really like the love story in Skip Beat, mostly because her actual love interest, Ren Suruga, is like in my top 5 shoujo hero of all time. That dude
that's
is
fair.
Messed up, and they kind of go into it over time, but it's like, again, batshit insane, the levels of, like, crazy that all of them are dealing with, and some of them are good crazy, and some of them are like, oh boy, I gotta fix this. Like, I gotta get over this trauma. I gotta, stop doing... and he, like, especially in that series, because they're performers, it goes into why somebody would be an actor in a totally different way from most things. Like, it's not about being famous. It's not about performing. It's about, like, if you can't find your own identity, sometimes it's easier to take on somebody else's. And Ren is so deep in his own shit that he doesn't even know who he is anymore. And she doesn't know which one is him, because he keeps having all these personas, and she's like, which one is the real one? And it's kind of, like, hinted at, and he's got an eating disorder that, like, took this really weird format that I totally loved, where if he hates something, he'll, like, write it on a alma rice and eat it. And he's like, eat your fear! And it's amazing. So
now you're making me want to start reading it again.
I'm waiting for it to finish. It's so long.
Yeah.
I'm waiting for the 60 volumes to end or whatever.
Yeah. And she even said that, like, the author's note, she's, like, apologizing. She's like, this arc is supposed to be a book and a half, and I'm on, like, book 8, and just, I'm really sorry. Why are people still paying me to write this? So
but people love it, so
Yeah.
she can do pretty
No,
much whatever she wants.
I really want it to go on forever. Like, Skip Beat is the shoujo, is like the shonen equivalent in shoujo, right? At this point, like that's how I think of it.
And
So
there's
I want
like
it to go on forever.
What is?
there's like tournament sections in it too, like who's the better actor, and it gets into the whole like everybody having a reaction shot and people trying to outact each other in real time, and you're like, what the fuck? Like, manga's great. Why?
Awesome.
So that yeah, you know what, I actually, there was one thing in particular that made me drop Skip Beat, which is a personal issue for me, just sort of something that I cannot really deal with in fiction. And they were, when it was, Ren was like first starting to be interested in Kyoko, and he was like feeling bad because she's high school age and he's, you know, he's an adult, and like a bunch of people were like, oh, 4 years isn't that much difference, and if you don't get her now, someone else is gonna come along and snatch her up. And that just sort of like kind of set off my creep meter, and I wasn't, like I said, like I was a little bit over it anyway, and that just sort of led me to like putting it down and never picking it back up.
Yeah. I would say in Skip Beat's defense, there's a lot of really creepy stuff that is kind of shown, and that's one of them, to be shown that is the outside influences that they are feeling. There's even kind of like an attempted rape and stuff that, well, sort of, that happens later, and they're kind of addressing like, oh, this is how it's going to be dealt with in the press. And she's like, okay, I can decide how I'm going to deal with it, and then I can decide, like, the press is kind of a separate issue. And not everything is handled super well. I thought Ren's deliberations over her age were very realistic. It's made clear over the course of the series that this is a real issue for him. He's thinking, like, I fully believe that, because I haven't read the last couple volumes. Like, I'm a few volumes behind. I think I stopped somewhere in, like, the 30s. That once they get together, they're basically going to get married and have kids. Like they've done all of the stuff you do with somebody you're going to marry, like the way that they've built their relationship. And one thing I also really liked about it is that it showed that he had a sexual history. I mean, what is he, 20? He's older, but he's not that old. 20 or 22 or something. And a lot of the time in shoujo, they'll kind of be like, oh, he's never been with a girl, is whatever, and it's like, he's the hottest guy in Hollywood, of course he's had sex with women. And they kind of brush upon that, and he also compares it to how different this situation is. That he's like, well, I've had relationships, so I know what I'm getting into, and she's younger than me, and I know that this is different, and how am I going to handle this? And I really liked that. I mean, he acted more like an adult, the way that people in shoujo, a lot of the time adults do not act like adults, especially if they're like a love interest. But I thought his whole thing was just really interesting. Like, it was an actual kind of conflict, but also you could see how it would work, despite it being,
Right. And yeah, and shoujo manga is actually, I'm looking at my bookshelf and I'm looking at Fruits Basket right now as I say this, like, so shoujo, and shoujo manga is not afraid to tackle difficult topics. Right. Like, whether or not they succeed with it is another thing. Because I feel like when they do well with it, it's really, really powerful. And I mean, like, shoujo is such a broad category, right? Like, there's always going to be some good stuff and some bad stuff that handles certain things well, stuff that handles certain things poorly. But it's like I'm looking at Fruits Basket and Utena and Paradise Kiss, which is, I guess, josei, but which is also a mixed bag in how well it handles things. But just what are some of shoujo's weaknesses, broadly speaking, as well? Like, what are some things that you see that recur across the sort of demographic frequently that it's just like, no.
Do you want to start, Ashley?
Please don't do that anymore. Yeah. Ashley, you want to go first? It's your turn.
We've discussed briefly, like, age gap romances, and of course, talking about how it handles difficult topics. Of course, there are some that do it well, but I'm thinking like recently I've been reading Takane and Hana, which is like silly, but like the whole premise is that it's a massive age gap. Like he's 26 or something and like rich and needs to marry somebody. And she's like taking the place of her older sister because like the older sister was like, I have a boyfriend, I don't want to marry this rich dude, whatever. So then the younger sister is like in high school and like they keep like it's supposed to be silly, it's gag. I'm like, I laugh at this, but I'm also like, I hate this whole premise. Like I don't know how to reconcile those feelings. And it's just like, yeah, like sometimes I'll just read stuff and be like, I don't know, it takes it too far. Like it's not given the gravity that it deserved in a way, sort of thing. I think that's what always bothers me in any type of fiction is when something really big happens, but it's like not given the weight that it kind of deserved. And as long as even if you, like I think FY stumbles a lot with much of its, darker issues, but I think that, at least Watase knows that they're dark issues and that they're hard and like will portray it in a way that is nuanced, if not nuanced, at least like is serious. So I'm like, okay, I can forgive any stumbles or like understand them in this context.
Right.
Yeah.
And I feel like Fushigi Yugi takes certain things seriously that other shoujo manga tends not to. Like, one very fair criticism of it is that it overuses sexual assault.
Yeah, there's a lot of it. A lot.
There's a lot of it. But it does, like, other than, I mean, there are two kinds of sexual assault in Fushigi Yugi. There's the kind where Hotohori and or Tamahome do not understand the concept of boundaries.
Yes.
But there's also, there's times when that whole arc where the Seiyu warriors are like, okay, our plan is to assault Miyaka so that she cannot summon a god.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And like that was really frustrating and exhausting, but at the same time it did take the assault seriously because and Tamahome is generally a pretty good boyfriend because what I'm getting to here, which is probably very predictable for anyone familiar with my work, is that a lot of shoujo manga has abusive boyfriends.
Yeah.
Yep.
And Lianne, I know you wrote like a blog post about that many years ago.
Yeah, I think it was like 2006 or something.
And I've been doing like an ongoing series on heroin problem, sort of taking a look at different, at a broad sampling of shoujo manga and being like, how, like, what are they romanticizing here? What are they forgiving here? What are they portraying as acceptable that no, it is not acceptable? And there's a lot of just like a lot of like touching without consent, a lot of verbal abuse. I'm currently working my way through Boys Over Flowers, and that series is just a hot mess.
You got to get out of some of this 90s stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
I actually have very little 90s stuff in there.
This was a big thing in the 90s.
Yeah.
Boys Over Flowers is the only 90s series that I've been looking at for an extended period, and I'm just getting started on Hanikimi, which is actually a very lovely series.
Yeah, no, that's
but like
that series is super tame.
I read Blackbird.
Oh yeah, I mean that's a shoujo smut. Like the ones with more sex tend to have more edge. There's not a lot of sweet sex stories. They're usually edgy.
Which I wish there was.
Yeah, no, I mean I think I would say like maybe some otome games, but they do tend to wrap the bad roots and the sex roots together pretty closely, so it is tricky.
Probably like Horimiya is not shoujo, but it does handle sex really, really well, and like even like kinky sex, like it like I read Blackbird and I get it, like it's a sort of a kind of a kink thing in a lot of ways, that this dangerous boyfriend who like yells at her and they give themselves to each other so fully. Please don't
He's also a literal monster.
Yeah, like please don't romanticize codependence, please. In addition to romanticizing everything else. But yeah, and I'm also going to be starting Hot Gimmick and Honey Hunt soon.
No, don't. Okay,
no, Hot Gimmick is the worst.
Hot Gimmick.
I mean, listen,
it's just gonna upset
I've
you.
read Hot Gimmick. I also hate how easy to read they are.
Oh, she's an amazing mangaka. Like,
oh
so
my
much
gosh,
of what she does
like,
is amazing and morally reprehensible.
When I check out like each week's books from the library, the first one I read is Boys Over Flowers because I can't stop myself, but I hate it the whole time. So like that's always been a big sticking point with me with shoujo manga. That and also they always marry their first love.
Yeah.
They always get married.
Don't read Itazura na Kiss then.
And that is honestly one of the lessons that I took away from shoujo manga that I shouldn't, is that like if you marry your best love, your first love, then that's like, you know, the most romantic thing ever. And because, and I've brought this up on this podcast before, I stayed in my first relationship for way, way longer than I should have, because like, no, I love him. He's my first love.
Oh boy.
We're gonna make it last forever. No, it didn't.
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of tricky. Like, when we talk about stuff that annoys us about shoujo, mine is kind of a broader thing that ties into a lot of these things, and it's the way that the story acknowledges the patriarchy. This is something that's very common, not just in shoujo, but in josei, and it takes a lot of different forms. But it's like, it's when you have a girl, let's say a teen girl, who's really good at things, and, you know, the people around her respect her, and her boyfriend, you know, she gets along with her boyfriend, whatever, and something will happen, and they're like, you're a girl after all. And you hear even that line a lot. So it's either when, like you let your guard down is another common thing, where it's like, a boy will push her on the bed or something, or
I hate that.
Yeah, debate
so
whether or not
much.
he's going to sexually assault her in her sleep, and that's supposed to be romantic. It's also like josei. I actually have a lot of difficulty reading a lot of josei because they're so depressing to me, because the way that they very directly acknowledge the patriarchy in those, because a lot of them have to do with office politics or something. And a lot of them are about the compromises you make to succeed and find happiness despite the patriarchy. And very few of them are about overcoming the patriarchy. I'm seeing more now that are like, you know, especially the series that are kind of about otaku and fujoshi, that are a little bit like, I never played by the system's rules anyway, so it's fine, who cares? And those are really fun, but they start with the premise that it's like, okay, you are kind of already a fallen woman, so what does it matter? And like the various things that they will undercut a woman's confidence by reminding her that she will still never have the status of a man, or she will still never truly be safe around men, that always really bothered me. And
yeah,
like, and there are very few shoujo that truly overcome that, and the ones that do, or at least do it most of the time, are the ones that I ended up going back to over and over. My favorite, well, one of my favorite shoujo, because it's very hard to boil it down to favorites, like Basara is like my go-to shoujo.
Oh yes,
and because every volume of, now granted, Basara was everybody in Japan's go-to shoujo for the entire 90s, so it's like there was a lot writing
that and
on
Banana
that.
Fish, right?
Yeah, it's considered like one of the greatest ones, but every volume of that made me want to go out and be a better person and do more for the world, because it's about, and the fact that, you know, for anybody who doesn't know the premise of Basara, it's like a post-apocalyptic Japan. It's kind of a desert fantasy, or rather a desert sci-fi, I guess. There's no actual magic in it from what I can remember. I think just sometimes miracles happen, but
destined warriors.
yeah, there's like a little bit of sort
prophecies.
of mysticism in it, but there's a pair of male and female twins. The boy is said to be the boy of destiny, who's gonna like rise up and defeat the evil king, and then he is killed in a raid. And then his twin sister cuts her hair and is like, no, I'm the boy of destiny, and basically decides to live as him and lead the peasants to revolution against the king, whom, by the way, she meets later in a hot spring with her clothes off by accident, bumps into him, doesn't know who he is, he doesn't know who she is, and they kind of meet and connect, and they sort of have sexual tension, and they split, and there's these two storylines that go forward. Like, the two of them, like, he'll put on his armor and be standing on his castle, and she'll put on, like, her boy clothes and be with the peasants, and they'll be, like, screaming at each other and willing to die to kill each other. And then when they have their day offs, they keep bumping into each other in their other forms and being like, oh, it's my secret boyfriend who goes by this name or whatever, without knowing who they actually are. Like, it's so amazing.
It's so good.
And, like, and the way that her femininity is shown as to be strength, specifically feminine traits, things like empathy. They say one of the reasons that, like, she's basically, it's a long series, it's like 25 volumes. She goes around the world and is gathering these people to join her force to overcome the various kings. There's actually 4 kings, and she has, like, really weird relationships with a couple of them. But they said one of the reasons people will go and die for her in battle is every time she rides out, she cries because she's thinking of all the people who aren't going to come back. And they're like, that's the reason why I follow her. And most people don't know that she's a woman. Some people do, like her inner circle does. But just the fact that, like, you would be sad enough to cry is shown as, like, your greatest strength as a warrior.
Right.
They do really cool things with her period in it. It's just like there's all kinds of great stuff. Yeah.
And another thing I really liked about, specifically talking about how shoujo manga handles the patriarchy in Basara, is that everyone assumed that her brother was the boy of destiny, because the prophet, like, looked at them as like, this is the child of destiny, and everyone's like, well, it's got to be the boy,
right.
Like, but no, like, it was her the whole time, but no one thought of that because she's the girl. Yeah, God, Basara is so good.
It's so good.
But yeah, like, you know, going back to, like, sort of talking about, like, how they discuss, like, how girls should be, oh, you're a girl after all. Like, a couple of different series came to mind. One was the manga version of Kare Kana.
Oh, God. Oh,
which
God.
is a lot of issues. But one that got me before things really, really started going to shit, like, was Tonami and I want to say Tsubaki, which was, she had bullied him as a child because he was fat and weak-willed, and he came back hot. And he's like,
huge.
I'm gonna make her, tall, hot and tall. He's like, I'm gonna make her, you know, get my revenge on her by making her fall in love with me, and then breaking her heart or whatever. And she's, you know, and she's an athlete, like, but there's a lot of emphasis putting on, like, when he's starting to fall in love with her for real, like, he's like, she's so frail and small, like, that's like,
oh God,
you know,
Karakana.
she's,
oh God,
yeah, what was the other example I had in mind? Blue Spring Ride.
Oh, that one I haven't read, actually.
Yeah.
It just got licensed by Shoujo Beat. I haven't read it, but I've seen the most of the anime. I didn't, but, like, and that has one of those, like, pushing her down, oh, you shouldn't let your guard down scenes as well. But, like, her whole thing is that when she was in middle school, the girls hated her because all the boys thought she was cute. So when she gets to high school, she decides she's going to act all masculine. So that, like, the boys won't like her and the girls will think she's cute. And their version of her being masculine is she eats a lot and her bag is kind of messy. And by kind of messy, I mean she stuffs her sweater in there without folding it.
Wow.
And I'm just
You
like,
rebel.
What a rebel, yeah.
Oh, yeah, right? But that's not feminine, so that makes her repulsive to the boys.
Oh, cool.
You know, another example of a shoujo that actually handles that quite well, weirdly, is Oran High School Host Club, which is constantly trying to impose that stuff on Haruhi, and it goes right over her head, and she's like, why would you think I would subscribe to the patriarchy? My father makes his money in, like, a drag club, and I make my money also in a drag club. And, like, they constantly kind of, they flirt with that idea, and then no one accepts it, and they just kind of move on, and it's kind of played up for a joke. So I love that series. It is just a delight.
Ashley, do you have any particular pet peeves you want to add?
It's like, actually, in thinking about it, since I started Shoujo Manga podcast to try to like celebrate shoujo and like get away from like focusing on its bad parts, I kind of struggled to do it. And like, I've tried really hard to like everything that I've done on that podcast, but like Hot Gimmick is the one shoujo manga where I was like, this I can't do. No, I hate you, Hot Gimmick. Hot Gimmick.
It's just
unbelievably
it's just
mean.
so mean.
Yeah.
There's your choices are like, it's like being stuck between a rock and a hard place, except they're both rapists. Like, one of them is a third-party rapist. He'll hire somebody to rape you. The other guy will rape him yourself. I mean, and it's literally the thought that she would not get with either of these men doesn't even cross her mind.
I know. So, like, whatever's going on in Hot Gimmick is definitely just, like, I can't with whatever's that level. But, like, otherwise, yeah, the stuff with, like, I really like series like Oran, and Maid-sama is actually my favorite series. I wouldn't try to objectively say that that's a good series, right? But like,
hey, like
I enjoy the series that deal with girls who are more masculine and struggling with femininity, and ones that are also about social class. So like, Oran and Maid-sama are definitely like check those boxes for me.
And
so
Princess
like,
Jellyfish, I hope.
I haven't
I
read
love
Princess Jellyfish.
Oh, you'd love it.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
If those are the two things
so
you like.
good.
For sure.
I gotta go now. I know.
Yeah, gender presentation in class is a really way to actually wrap up. Well, that plus like being a weird otaku, but yeah, you'll love it.
Yeah,
It's great.
But yeah, like Maid-sama has the scene, like you guys keep bringing up the scene of like, but you're a girl anyway. I'm like, I can remember that exact scene in Maid-sama, and I think it maybe kind of subverts it because it like the next scene is, you know, some ish, you know, the point of Maid-sama is that she works at a maid cafe. So her main love interest, Usui, is like, you know, you have to be careful around these weird otaku who come here. They'll like want to rape you and whatever. And Misaki is, of course, like, I am a badass. Like, it's fine, Usui, hop off or whatever. Like, so there is a scene where two otaku do try to rape her. They like tie her up.
Yikes.
And then Usui like senses it, so he like jumps in through the window, but she's already like broken out of the chair and like fought them, and he's just like, oh, well, now I just broke your shop's window for no good reason, I guess. Like, cool, bye. So like in that way, it's like I just feel like so many shoujo manga have like the best and the worst of everything in them, almost.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, nothing's perfect.
And I think almost all of them address that point, like, oh, you're just a girl, and it's kind of how you handle it. And some series handle it really well. You know, we've talked about a couple of examples. Some of them handle it okay. Some of them handle it badly, but it's like the rest of the series kind of counteracts that, so it like kind of balances out. I would say Skip Beat is a little bit more in that category. Like the few times that the patriarchy comes up and stuff, it's like it's annoying. And the same thing with Tokyo Crazy Paradise, which is a fucking amazing series that she did. Got kind of cop-outy by the end when it was literally about a girl dressed as a boy as a bodyguard for her classmate who's a Yakuza leader, whose father killed her. No, it was like they were both of her father a cop, his father a Yakuza, both got killed in the same something, so she ended up being his bodyguard for money, and it's amazing. But yeah, she's not super good at handling that stuff. But so the ones that embody the patriarchy and are constantly undermining itself, those are the ones that they really bother me. On a fundamental level, I hate what they're telling girls. I hate that they're ruining a feminine fantasy by reminding you of that. And personally, and I know a lot of other girls have done that, have done this, that's part of the reason I started reading Boys Love, was I couldn't take it anymore. And Boys Love sidesteps that entire issue because they're not female characters in it, for the most part. That I couldn't take any more female characters being knocked down a peg, quote unquote, by the story itself for no good reason. Just because they're like this is supposed to be my fantasy, right? I don't want to hear about how even the men you like the most might rape you. Like, that's not what I'm here for.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
And I'm not even talking about the stuff where you have like guys who are too aggressive and stuff. Like, those can be edgy and they're not for everybody. But it's different from saying, oh, because you're a girl, this happened to you. and not because of
Right.
the relationship we have or the kind of person he is or who you are or whatever. It's like, it's that stupid because you're a girl line that was what really killed me, because it
Right.
took it outside of the relationship and made it an issue with your entire identity as a person in this world is now like, don't get too uppity, you know? And it just like bugged me. And Boys Love has, don't get me wrong, tons of its own issues. You want to talk about sexual assault, but Boys Love also will talk about, you know, Junior Romantic is a really good example. Is something that's kind of considered pretty mainstreamy despite being not very good. Junior Romantica, you know, but still became kind of like the banner series for a while because it got so many anime episodes, which is really rare in Boys Love. That had one of the couples, one of the fundamental arguments was kind of like, I refuse to give up my job for my relationship. And like, it was almost like not even a question of like, of course I'm not going to just give you up for my career, or of course I can't just drop my job, you know, for these things. That it's like, we have to balance work and life. And that almost never was addressed in the same way in Josei. And Junjo's not even that good a series, you know, but it was like the assumptions there that you would quit your job once you got married, that you would take a certain role, you know, even Uke's seme dynamics being sort of a separate thing. It was like, of course you have your own life and your own responsibilities and your own kind of expectations. You live outside of this other man. And I just kind of needed to read that, you know?
Have you read Fumi Yoshinaga's work?
I have read so much Fumi Yoshinaga's work.
Okay. I mean, I figured, but I think I haven't read her early
Obsessively
stuff, but like, because I think she's very aware of all this sort of gender stuff, and like Oku is a josei that does a lot of interesting things about like, you know, patriarchy and how flimsy of a setup it is. Or I read her quote unquote not autobiographical manga
About eating?
yeah, and like it has a scene where she actually like apologizes to her gay friend, like, I wrote all of this terrible boys love. Like, I'm so sorry. He's like, it's okay.
Oh yeah, well, especially
over
because
it.
he's like, I'm a gay man. If I got offended with every bad representation of me, I'd never get out of bed. And she just looks like really horrified, you know, being complicit in this. And I think even he said, like, I assumed you were basing it, or like I had inspired you or something. She's like, oh my god, I didn't even know you were gay. I am so sorry. Please don't think that I was trying to represent anything. And I mean, personally, to me, I know a lot of people have difficulty reading Gerard and Jacques, which has a very brutal opening scene. I love that comic so much. I think it's like, I think it's so well constructed as kind of like a, it feels like a Shakespearean tragedy to me, despite being like really trashy at its core. And it also did not let the Uke have like any power at any point in the story, even though there was a really great part where he could have had power and she just didn't, which kind of annoyed me. But I really like that one. Obviously Antique Bakery is like a work of art, and you should 100% watch the Korean live action movie off of it, which is like also brilliant in a extended things in a really beautiful way. Oku is the thing that I like the most about Oku. It's too long. It's too long.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is sort of running out of steam.
I heard originally it was
It
supposed to be
feels
10
like it's
volumes.
coming towards a conclusion.
Yeah,
though.
I mean, I assume so at this point. But one thing that I loved volume 2 of that a lot, because it was about the beginning of when the patriarchy failed because all the men were dying. And they're like, okay, we can't have a patriarchy. I guess we're going to have a matriarchy. And everybody lost their shit, like, simultaneously. Nobody knew how to handle it. Everybody is, like, raping and killing each other. Because, like, the subversion of what they'd always known to be true, even if maybe a lot of them had not thought this hard about it, they were like, what do you mean we have to have a female shogun? Let's just go to war with each other constantly right now. And, you know, just all kinds of things there. That is a really powerful and difficult read, volume 2, but I loved it.
Yeah. I love What Did You Eat Yesterday, too.
Yeah, that one...
Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, that's okay. The only thing I wanted to say about Oku is that is a crystal clear example of an actual subversion of the patriarchy, because people don't understand what the patriarchy is, and they think that if you swap out women with men, that you'll, like, get it, but she actually did that. She swapped out women for men, like turned the matriarchy into the patriarchy into the matriarchy, and represented the way the patriarchy actually is. So that meant that men were valued, men were the sex class, but they could have, they could do things outside of that, but they never actually had power, no matter how much they were valued for anything, even the sexual power they had over the women. It never gave them actual power. And they kind of, some of them knew that and some of them didn't, but there was like that glass ceiling that they always hit. And
right.
I can't think of a single time where somebody has actually done that correctly. So I think the brilliance of Oku is you hand it to somebody who doesn't get what the patriarchy is. And it's like, okay, this is told, a lot of them, the stories are told through the man's point of view. Like, this is what it would actually be like if you were in women's position right now. So I think it's a valuable educational tool that way. I just wish it wasn't a trillion volumes long, going through like 18 different generations of Shogun.
Hello, everyone. This is the podcast editor, Peter. This episode ran a bit long, about 2 hours and change, so I am going to stop it here at sort of a natural breaking point. But I guess that means I get to do the closing this time. You can find more of our work at animefeminist.com. We're on Twitter at animefeminist, facebook.com/animefem, animefeminist.tumblr.com, and we're on Patreon at patreon.com/animefeminist. As always, if you could spare as little as $1 a month, it really does add up and help us out. About half of our donators are $1 a month patrons, and it really helps us out. We're going to get the second half of the episode to you next week, about just over an hour from the looks of it. So thanks to Caitlin, Ashley, and Lianne, and all of you for listening.